the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome back, Justin. Hello, everyone.
So, Lindsay, this is, I think, our second most controversial movie that we've ever done for the podcast. And when I say controversial, I mean where you tell someone like, hey, this is the movie we're doing next. I'm like, wait, you're doing what movie? And I feel like we had a lot of that when we did Kids. And now here we are doing Showgirls. This is a strange movie, I know, for us to do. But the thing about it is like, regardless of if you like or dislike a movie like this, when a movie has this kind of controversy surrounding it and like that it bombs so hard at the box office and some people consider it the worst movie ever made, movies like this happen. I always want to know like, well, what caused it? What were all the reasons why this happened? I think that there's an easy way to point to of like, oh, you know, it's like a whirlwind of like, there's nudity, there's things. Whatever. And we'll talk about a lot of that in this episode. I was very happy to find this Blu-ray release that we were able to get a hold of.
It's impressive.
Yeah,
like the packaging is immaculate.
Really one of the nicest Blu-ray releases I've seen in a long time from Vinegar Syndrome. And if you aren't familiar with them, they're a boutique Blu-ray, and they really put a lot of care into the releases that they do, and there's usually a lot of special features. And so it's nice to have that to reference, as well as Adam Naiman's book on Showgirls. And he was also a part of it was like a documentary that came out called You Don't Know Me, N-O-M-I, that we got to check out. So there's a lot of talk that's happened and a lot of reevaluation of Showgirls over the last decade. And it's starting to become more embraced by an audience that either disregarded it because they heard how bad it was when it came out and never saw it, or they're watching it, you know, with new eyes and like not influenced by or surrounded by all the hype and negativity that was around the movie when it was released.
When this came out, I was probably 13 or 14, I think, and I didn't see it when it came out, but I saw it like a couple years later, and I never understood why, because I never thought it was a bad movie, and I mean, I still don't now. In fact, I think as the years have gone on, with each viewing, I see something new or more interesting. And certainly after like powering through numerous viewings for this episode, it's become one of the most entertaining rewatches for a movie that's over 2 hours. I can't look away from it. It's nonstop entertaining, and I've really enjoyed learning the backstory behind this movie.
Yeah, I didn't see this when it was released in theaters, so I worked at a movie theater. The theater I worked at was in a mall, and so we didn't get the movie because it was too controversial.
It was NC-17.
Yeah, so it landed at, I think, 1 or 2 screens in St. Louis, and I didn't see it because at that time I was really into following movie news, like at that point in my life, and, getting Entertainment Weekly, and just the sheer volume of negativity that came out surrounding this movie wasn't so much like, oh, it was explicit, because as a 16, 17-year-old male, I was like, oh, what's, and I was a fan of Saved by the Bell, and I liked Elizabeth Berkley, and this thing is like, oh, this is her big feature film debut.
I was so excited for her. Like, I didn't care that there was a bunch of nudity. I was so excited.
Didn't end up going to see it just simply because of the mass train of just one bad review after another, and people were saying this is like absolutely terrible. And I don't think I saw it for like a couple years, and then finally I just think I got curious about it and rented it. I don't remember liking it that much, but I do remember when we first started talking about doing this movie and I did my first rewatch, and that's always a moment where I'm like, okay, I want to sit down and watch this movie with a completely open mind. And the first 20 minutes of this movie is kind of nuts. Like, I can see how someone watched the first 10 or 15 minutes of this, like, this is terrible because the tone is strange. Everything is like really amped up. But then the movie, after you get over that hump, it settles in and becomes the movie that it is. Now when after 3 or 4 watches, I get numbed out from how crazy this first 15 minutes is and how over the top it is. And it feels more a part of the movie as a whole. and I'd get it a little bit more. But, you know, there's just this mystery around this character, and she acts so psychotic in the beginning. And
the beginning,
well, through the whole movie, but the first, you know, she has like, I would say like 3 episodes of like treating people, like screaming at people and like threatening people. And usually you don't get that from a main character. You know, you want your audience to embrace a character, and this character almost like pushes the audience away. But you don't see movies like that so often. So at the same time, it does make the movie interesting to me, because that's generally not the standard, especially for a big studio film. They're like, we want to franchise this. We want the audience to fall in love with this character. And she just comes out swinging, and it's very raw. You know, it's like very, again, like it's almost like this like psychoticness in her eyes. In my mind, it was like it's almost like the beginning of that movie, The Stepfather from the 80s, if you would have saw her leave a house from wherever she was coming from and everybody was massacred in it, and then it cuts to the opening of Showgirls, it would make more sense of like where she's coming from, but we don't know. And so since she's just like this blank page in the beginning, all you're getting is this like amped up intensity, and you don't know where it's coming from. And it is revealed throughout the movie later on, but you put your guard up immediately with this character.
There are a lot of things that are atypical about this movie as far as comparing it to how the narrative flow of other films generally go. And for Nomi, who's the main character played by Elizabeth Berkley, her story arc, and when we do find out a little bit of her backstory, it is not until way later in the movie, basically when the movie is about to wrap up. And that's something that doesn't really happen in films, because we want to empathize with her. We want to get to know her, but we don't really understand where she's coming from until like the very end. But that's her redemption in a way. And I think if critics or if audiences didn't stick with the movie until that point, you could walk away going, what did I just watch? And you know, you talk about the first 10 or 15 minutes being like totally crazy. That's one of the aspects that help build the kind of cult following that, you know, you sit down and watch this and you go, what in the world am I watching? I've never seen anything like this. And then you're almost desensitized because it starts out so intense that when other intense things that happen continuously throughout the movie, you're already desensitized to it. This heightened reality became the norm for this movie, which is, I think, one of the reasons people just didn't get it in 1995.
And there's also another aspect of this movie that I don't think is talked about when this negativity surrounded, and like, oh, it's bad acting, it's bad filmmaking, bad story, bad script, what the reviews were suggesting. But when you watch this movie, I had it on and see how well made and executed this movie is and visually stunning it is.
Yeah, no one ever talks about it. Last night I sent you a clip of, it's not even a moment from Goddess. It's when Nomi's sitting on the hood of her car eating a comically large burger, but it's over like this beautiful shot of her overlooking Las Vegas. And it's a contemplative moment that that Nomi's having, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And I don't know how many scenes there are like that in the film, but they're expansive and really just sink you into this world. Paul Verhoeven really does just sink us into the world of Las Vegas with all of the neon and glamour and glitz, and it is gross and gritty, but it's also beautiful at the same time. And it's tonally a strange film. I mean, people always say the film was ahead of its time, but in a way, I kind of think that this one was. 30 years later, especially for as much nudity as in this movie, 30 years later, I don't even think that this would be NC-17. In 2024, I don't think so at all.
Well, I think this movie, if nowadays, this would be a 10-part series that HBO would do.
While there is nudity everywhere in this film, it doesn't feel sleazy the way that it's shot. Like the Vegas world that we're in is sleazy, but it feels like completely tasteful and it feels comfortable. I think that also adds to the overall kind of beauty of the film. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about in this film. We can't even wait to start.
It's a good conversation piece because it's like, the intro and we already like diving in, but we're gonna talk about the making of the film, the reaction to the film. So much happened in this period where a high-end director, a well-paid screenwriter, a new actor, and just this crazy movie that was made, and then this sort of explosive reaction that this movie had and how it kind of derailed careers is all very fascinating.
This is also justice for Elizabeth Berkley because she's damn fine in this movie. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, Elizabeth Berkley really became like the whipping post for everything was put on her shoulders, all the blame, and we'll talk about that as well. We also, after Showgirls, we'll get into our picks of the week. It was really hard. I was like trying to figure out like what fits with this movie. And I was thinking about doing Coyote Ugly because I feel like there's a lot of parallels between that story and this story. But ultimately, I ended up on Starship Troopers, which was Paul Verhoeven's movie that he did after Showgirls, which didn't have the backlash that Showgirls did, but it also was him doing a high-budget sci-fi film that was like wildly misunderstood. And just like Showgirls, it's found an audience now, but at the time, people just didn't get the satire, and they were just, and really, again, bashed the way that the acting was, you know, because it is over the top, and was one of those movies that is very smart and sophisticated, but is also like very comical and over the top, and he's playing with a lot of the same things that he did in Showgirls and some of his earlier works, but that one just didn't work for people, and now it's like Showgirls is finding a new audience.
I think you're going to have some people that want that as a full episode.
Yeah.
That really has found a new audience.
All his movies, I feel like they're aging well, like RoboCop that we've talked about, Total Recall, Showgirls, Starship Troopers, the commenting on culture and the way society works, especially in America, in, you know, via capitalism or privatizing police and these things that don't seem that far-fetched, and almost like you can see us drifting into that society, you know, not too far from what he predicts in some of his futuristic type movies. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I was curious. You did not let me know what your pick of the week was. So you're revealing it to me now for the first time.
Well, I think this won't come as a surprise to you or to anyone who knows me. I had to. Along with Showgirls and loving her performance in this, I had to go with a Gina Gershon movie, and that was Bound. I love Bound, and that I think is also another one that people sometimes don't understand the tonality of it too, that it can seem cheesy. It can seem kind of like an oddly placed in time film, but I love kind of the noir aspect to it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's a great pick. I saw that for the first time when it came out on video, but then didn't see it for many, many years. And then you and I saw it in theaters together. It was like 6 or 7 months ago at the Arcadin Cinema here in St. Louis. And their programming is just absolutely incredible and perfect place to see that movie. And the audience that was there, I mean, it was like sold out crowd, and you see how these movies have built this cult following and just such an appreciative audience for that film.
Arcadin also did a showing of Showgirls too, and this movie has gone on to gain a cult following that we'll talk about later. But seeing Showgirls with a crowd is really, I mean, it's up there with Rocky Horror Picture Show, or depending on your taste, seeing Mommy Dearest or something that's like a inappropriate, just something that's maybe a little offensive, but with a crowd is unlike anything else, with a dark humor.
Well, Lindsay, before we go into our first clip, and I will probably say now that some of the discussions and probably the clips in this are not work friendly. So if you're listening to this episode at work, you may want to just be forewarned that the clips might be a little bit more controversial than the other clips that we usually play for the episodes. But before we go into that first clip, Lindsay, can you just quickly give me your brief summary, your lowdown in your words, what this movie is about?
Nomi Malone is a dancer with dreams in her heart. She might look naive, but she's trying to leave her dark past in the dust. Las Vegas bound with only one suitcase, her leather jacket, and a pocket knife. Nomi's introduction to the strip would have been a complete disaster had she not met Molly, a costume designer for the famous Stardust Hotel. Luckily for Nomi, Molly's willing to help out this erratic, high-energy stranger and land on her feet. And quickly Nomi gets a job at a seedy strip bar. Nothing is going to stop her from dancing, no matter how she has to enter the Vegas scene. But Nomi's world is about to be completely rocked once Molly introduces her to Crystal Connors, the Stardust Hotel's headliner, with their epic stage performance of Goddess. There's an immediate connection between the up-and-comer and the well-established star. Nomi begins to see her lifelong dreams begin to manifest, despite being surrounded by and surviving in a world populated by narcissistic, egomaniacal assholes. As Nomi gets closer and closer to the top, is she willing to sacrifice what morals she came with to Vegas? They say if you stay in Sin City long enough, the good and bad start to bleed together, washing away any innocence you once had. In this story of climbing and survival, succession, revenge, and acceptance, Showgirls might top the list of the most misunderstood films in the last 50 years. Widely mocked upon its release, it's time to peel back the layers of this flashy, neon light-laden extravaganza that is Showgirls.
Thank you for that. Let's go to our first clip, and we'll come back. We'll talk about Showgirls some more.
One day she looks like Pollyanna. The next day she looks like, I don't know, Lolita maybe. Nice dress.
Thanks. I bought it at Versace. In the Forum?
Oh yeah, Versace. I love Versace.
Me too.
Okay, you know Marty?
Hi.
Hi.
Gay's our line captain.
Hi. Hi.
If you let me down, I could lose my reputation for being such an all-knowing prick. I worked very hard for that reputation, so don't do it. Deal?
Deal.
Gay will show you around.
Okay.
Let's get going. Nomi, we'll do a run through this afternoon.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
They always tell you that in Vegas, just before they take your money. You need to maintain your weight. Eat a lot of brown rice and vegetables. And stay indoors. I don't want to see any tan lines. Your makeup and your costumes are your own responsibility. Don't take them home. Whatever you do, don't ever go out on stage crying. You do eat brown rice and vegetables, don't you?
Sure.
Good. This is your table. If you're smart, and I was smart, you'll figure out a job and a man for later on.
How'd you find your guy?
I chipped my tooth on a quaalude. Who's my dentist? I'm gonna be running this monster 6 times a night. Hold on to the railing, you don't want to fall.
That may have been our longest intro that we've ever done for an episode, which just shows that this movie really sparks some conversation.
Yeah.
I think I was like the most excited to kind of just sit down and start talking about this movie with you after watching it a few times. I kind of want to start before we dive into the making of this movie. You know, you're listening to this and you're like unaware of like who made Showgirls or where it's coming from. The talent behind this movie is like kind of overwhelming. I mean, we have Paul Verhoeven. We've covered 2 of his movies on this, RoboCop and Total Recall. We're big fans. The movie was written by Joe Esterhaus, who, if you don't know anything about him, you could go down a rabbit hole. The guy has some amazing behind the scenes Hollywood stories. He sounds like a very complicated and interesting fellow. But he wrote Flashdance, which was a huge hit, and him and Paul Verhoeven teamed up, and Esterhaus wrote Basic Instinct. Paul Verhoeven directed Basic Instinct. Though, from what I understand, they had a lot of disagreements and a lot of tension on the set. That movie became a cultural, huge success. I mean, it was sort of like a big boom of erotic thrillers that lasted for many years after Basic Instinct came out, and that movie also like made Sharon Stone a household name. Off of the success of that film, there really was the studios were just like, what do you want to make? We're going to fund something. And that's sort of like where the makings of this movie started, was Hollywood willing to write a check if these two were teaming up to make whatever their next thing is, whatever they wanted to do.
We're going to return back to Basic Instinct and how this directly influenced Showgirls in a second. But with Esterhaus being one of the most sought-after screenwriters in Hollywood, this idea for Showgirls kind of came out of after talking with a friend about making a movie about Las Vegas, this expansive movie about the seedy underbelly of the Las Vegas world. And it's a pretty big target of a story. So, I mean, was this going to be something that was bigger than just what Showgirls ended up being, which is more of a targeted story about Nomi Malone? But it did start out as more of a overall kind of idea, is where Esterhaus was going with it. He also thought that this would, in some sense, be able to challenge American morals and, you know, force Americans to kind of look at what we popularize and capitalism and, kind of put a mirror up to society and make us face what's actually going on in this world. So with this idea of, challenging values, spiritual choices, innocence, corruption, this was a hot time to bring this topic up. Sex was pretty big in the mid-90s as far as in films. It was a taboo topic, certainly not something that would make Esterhaus shy away from. I mean, the man was partially responsible for popularizing it, especially with Basic Instinct. The other idea that had been being tossed around forever, according to Esterhaus, was making a modern day All About Eve. If any of you are familiar with that movie, it's 1950 from Joseph Mankiewicz. It's a really great movie that does have a lot of parallels to Showgirls. And that idea had been thrown around for a while, so he thought about, okay, maybe putting in some All About Eve aspects and combining it to Las Vegas, but maybe putting in some more satirical aspects to the story. So kind of with this outline idea of a story, he started thinking about, what director am I going to go after? In 1988, he did a movie called Betrayed, which I, for some strange reason, at the age of 6 or 7, loved. It starred Tom Berenger and Deborah Winger. Was this kind of sultry thriller that was directed by Costa Gavras. That was the first person that Esterhaus thought about going after. He was unavailable, so next up was Paul Verhoeven, who he had just made Basic Instinct, which was a huge smash hit. I think in 1992 when that came out, it was number 6, I think, after the year was over, and it came out in like March, was number 6 as like highest grossing movie of that year. And Justin already said that Verhoeven and Esterhaus got into some arguments on that, so that's why Verhoeven wasn't necessarily the first person to go after. But Verhoeven was perfect kind of for this role. They had already worked together. Paul also knew how to provoke audiences. In fact, he kind of thought it was a little funny. He is also not afraid of female characters, strong female characters. Instead of being threatened by their power, he tries to amp that up in his female characters. I always think about Sharon Stone in Total Recall. Like, her characters, it's a bit role, but damn, that character's awesome. He's not afraid of strong women in his films. He also has a history of extreme violence and sexuality in his films. He's not afraid of nudity. He loves nudity. He loves to talk about how much he loves nudity, but not in a pervy way. And Verhoeven's also known to get really engrossed in his films and also provide this unexpected depth that you're not assuming is going to come out of something like RoboCop or Total Recall, anything that's saying more under the surface than what you're being given visually. So by putting Esterhaus and Verhoeven together, they could basically get anything greenlit that they wanted. Basic Instinct was huge, so they got together with the producers, Alan Marshall and Mario Casar, to get kind of Showgirls going. Irvin Winkler was the glue that brought these guys back together and frequently would damper the any fights between both Paul and Joe. So Joe takes this unfinished script, some ideas, some thoughts about making this musical in Vegas to Mario Casar, who's the head producer at Carol Co. Pictures. Verhoeven was excited about this idea because he'd always been obsessed with musicals since he was a kid and very stoked about the idea of being able to make something that's, for him, is kind of alien. He never thought that he could make something like a musical before, so this was really exciting to him. Once Verhoeven is secured into this, he starts weighing in on Esterhaus's ideas. The disagreements kind of start initially. Verhoeven's like, I want this to be NC-17, and Joe thinks, I don't think it really needs to be. I don't think we need to go that far. You're alienating a section of our audience that won't go see it, and then some people that are just not ever going to see it. And an NC-17 rating is universally known to be kind of box office death. But Verhoeven is like hard on wanting to go as far with this NC-17 rating as possible.
NC-17, like you said, is such a thing that studios wanted to avoid because that means the movie's not going to play at malls. A lot of cinema houses aren't going to show it.
You can't advertise it.
Yeah, you can't advertise it. And, I just think about how many movies we've talked about where directors were fighting the MPAA about trying to get an R rating versus an X rating in the 80s, like so many horror movies. But for a director who's like, I'm going to make this big studio film, and I'm asking for an NC-17. That's what I want. I want this to be rated NC-17 is really unheard of, and in a lot of ways, just downright crazy way to, that's like the first warning sign of like, this movie bombed at the box office. Well, remember when this guy is like, I want to have all these restrictions put on me to make money for this movie, to make money and be successful in movie theaters.
And both Joe Esterhaus and Paul Verhoeven said that the success that they gained from Basic Instinct opened up any door, but they do admit in hindsight that they probably could have been reeled in a little bit. And I don't think that Verhoeven would retract the NC-17 rating now, but I think that he understands that played against the film.
Again, how many episodes have we talked about where people struggled with a studio backing a movie, and Joe Esterhaus, I think, had wrote down essentially something like what the basic premise for Showgirls was on the napkin, and got a $2 million advance to write the script, which I remember that getting written up about in all the movie magazines back in the day, because that just, again, is something never happens. And so, it's just like talk about giving two people like total control.
It is pretty wild. And it's not that they disagreed on everything. Both Verhoeven and Esterhaus, they agreed that this movie should be elevated and almost this kind of expressionistic idea of being something dramatically distorted or altered to emotionally affect the audience, to create a mood that's bigger than the idea that you're seeing. So in essence, when we watch Showgirls and we see everything that's over the top, this was intended from the get-go, from everything, the origin of this story before the script was written, everything being over the top was intended. And Verhoeven really wanted to play this up. A lot of people have gone back and forth on, saying that this movie is campy. Verhoeven didn't want it to be campy. It was meant to be a heightened sense of reality, something that is, in a sense, grounded, but just like nothing you've ever seen, which tracks for every movie that he's done in the past. I think, though, that Showgirls is maybe the most grounded in reality that he's ever done, but it is still like elevated. The other thing that Verhoeven introduced more so was this idea of taking key points from the 1950 Mankiewicz movie All About Eve. And I went back and rewatched it because it's been, like 25 years, I think, since I've seen All About Eve. And man, one, the movie's brilliant. I love it. But the similarities are pretty wild. It's pretty basic. You have an aging star and a fan that comes in and is immediately just kind of welcomed into her world, kind of unexpectedly, and begins to worm her way in. At first, you think it's innocent, and I think in a sense it is some innocence. But then you see like the truth behind this woman, that once she gets a taste of like, I could ice out this woman who I've been idealizing and take over and be the goddess, right? That is Showgirls. That is Showgirls. And I think if you love Showgirls or love the story, man, go back and watch All About Eve. It's a pretty cool pairing to watch these movies. It's not that Showgirls is a ripoff at all, but taking just these key plot points out of it, it's a brilliant way to not do a remake, but to take inspired ideas from. So Verhoeven and Esterhaus have come to an agreement on what they want, and they, together with a journalist from Los Angeles, go to Las Vegas for a couple months, and they speak to, I heard, anywhere from 50 to 200 dancers, do some interviews, all backgrounds, all types of dancers who worked in Vegas, and take actual stories that these people have shared with them and work it into what is going to become this script. Joe gives a series of notes to Paul from all of these encounters, kind of works out a semi-first draft, and goes to producer Charlie Evans. This is where this $2 million advance comes from to get the project started. And after that, this idea, this kind of formation of the script gets sold to Carol Co. and is fronted another $1 million. Again, throwing this money at a film that they're planning on making NC-17 and without really like a finished idea, it's just friggin' wild to me. All based off of the success of Basic Instinct, which had its problems, but still packed theaters, which is, at the end of the day, what matters. The script's completed by 1993, and Nomi Malone is born. But unfortunately, Mario Casar and Paul didn't fully like it. They thought that Esterhaus was being a little derivative of himself and was taking elements of his previous script, Flashdance, and we needed to change some things. But something unexpected happens that throws a little wrench into all of the plans for Showgirls. An entirely finished script for Crusades comes in, and this was supposed to be an Arnold Schwarzenegger vehicle. Verhoeven had already worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he is like, whoa, this is already ready, and I mean, this is going to be epic. Yeah, okay, so I'm abandoning Showgirls, and I'm going into this project with Schwarzenegger, and we're going to make Crusades. Esterhaus is pissed about this, but Paul's, maybe we can come back to Showgirls, but not right now. I'm going to go on and make this. So Verhoeven exits Showgirls and for the next 6 months starts kind of pre-production on making this. Unfortunately, the proper funding became unavailable to make such a huge movie because Mario Casar had put so much money into producing Cutthroat Island. Then after 6 months of production, Crusades was abandoned. Say what you will, if Cutthroat Island hadn't been made, Crusades would have, and then Showgirls wouldn't have been made. But it is nuts to think about 6 months of pre-production and sets and everyone being into a whole other production of a film for then it to just get abandoned. And Verhoeven is blindsided by this, but since he's now not doing this project, he goes back to Showgirls.
And wow, this was the information that when I found out about this, it's like we were so close to getting a Arnold Schwarzenegger, Paul Verhoeven directed movie about the Crusades. Because when you think about the late 90s stuff that Schwarzenegger was doing, God, this really would have been a great part of his filmography. And
totally.
I wish that it would have, somebody after Showgirls, but then, because that movie bombed so hard, Verhoeven was like, they were not letting him do what he wanted anymore.
It still was a Schwarzenegger vehicle. Like, how could you not?
Yeah.
So Showgirls is back on track, kind of. We needed some additional funding, and a French company, Chargeur Saidu, comes in and helps out Mario Casar and Carol Coe. And Casar admits that without this company coming in and putting up a lot more money, there would have been no way that Showgirls would have been made. With Paul back on board, he's really adamant about taking out Flashdance story aspects, bumping up the All About Eve inspirations, introducing the Molly character, who from my understanding was not in the original script, and Molly is Nomi's best friend in this film, who plays a pretty pivotal part in the film and in Nomi's journey and story arc. The All About Eve inspired story aspects were going to be a little bit more superficial than in that film. This is going to be Vegas style versus the New York theater scene. Paul even nicknamed Showgirls All About Evil, which is, it kind of is. This is a really seedy, disgusting world that we travel through with Nomi Malone. With the script being finalized and the idea of making this film without constraints, without bowing to anyone who could possibly be offended, making this raw Vegas show subculture film that was a reflection of human morals and values, just influenced Verhoeven to want to amp up the intensity and hyperbolic style of the film. So despite their agreements on Basic Instinct, once Joe's final script comes in, Paul decides that whatever it is, we're going with it. They kind of come to this agreement because I think in hindsight, Verhoeven saw the problems that Esterhaus had with Basic Instinct, and he didn't want to make the same mistakes that he did with Basic Instinct. So he's like, we're just going to go with what you have. We have somewhat of an agreement. So with that, the Showgirls production starts.
I find it so interesting, too, that the change in the script was introducing this Molly character who essentially is like, I think, the hardest part of the movie to wrap your head around, that she would allow Nomi to stay at her house and just sort of like take her in under her wing, because her first introduction to Nomi is like someone who's like screaming at her and like almost like messed up her car and then almost like runs out into traffic. It just seems like a very odd beginning of a friendship, but I think it does work in the movie. I just thought it was like interesting, like, oh, here's what we'll do. We'll insert this character who's going to basically help Nomi along and even take abuse by her, but is willing to no, I want to help you out. I want to be your friend, which seems very, it's skirted on in the script. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but again, I think it works overall. And then obviously we'll talk about it, but her character is assaulted later on in the film, and that really, talking about tonal shifts, it's like really changes the total atmosphere of the movie into where it almost becomes like a revenge story versus Nomi like putting all her eggs in one basket for being a showgirl in Vegas.
The consistency for who the characters are is really unwavering in this film. Everyone is manipulative, has the ability to lie without regard. They don't really care about each other. It's all about getting ahead and very selfish, except for the character of Molly. And her introduction, while it does seem like the chances of you meeting someone in Las Vegas that says, oh, you're having a rough time, why don't you come move in with me, complete stranger? I mean, it probably wouldn't happen. But the fact that Molly stays so consistent in who she is throughout the film, I think that's why I just continue to buy it. And we see also that Molly is, she's not just a nobody. She's got a really good job at the Stardust Hotel. And she doesn't initially use that to help Nomi along. That doesn't come along until a little bit down the road. And Nomi's already kind of worked her way into the Vegas system.
And there is a scene that I think is very realistic to a friendship. She calls Nomi out when Nomi kind of blows up at the Gina Gershon character. And this is someone who directly affects Molly's livelihood, her job. She calls Nomi out and is like, you can't do this. You can't talk to these people this way. You could get me fired, and like I got to pay my rent. And it's the first dose of, I think, realness in the movie, because up until that point, like you said, it's a very heightened reality, but that grounds the movie. And she does a lot of times, and I think she grounds it, and her character really like stops it from entering into like full on camp.
And she grounds the film even later when we see that she's taking people out. She's pushing people down the stairs, and although Molly doesn't see it, she knows that Nomi did that. And for her to call her out, she calls out her best friend and says, you did that, didn't you? Again, Molly grounding the story. She's really the only innocent one, and I think it's important to have, even if you have one pillar, one grounding force in this chaotic film, it's pretty important to keep this reality centered.
Now, we'll talk about casting a little bit later, but it's hard to not really intertwine casting, because of all the ease that this movie had with like getting budgeted and getting a green light, really it seemed like the only thing I could find in research that was the biggest struggle for getting this movie made is like finding the star for the movie, because they were looking for someone who was relatively new to the industry, someone that was young, someone that was totally comfortable doing full frontal nudity, and someone who could really dance. And that's pretty tall order,
and dance while naked.
Yeah, dance while naked. And so naturally the first few people that they were eyeing, people who were more established, did not want to do this movie, which is understandable, because you don't really, even though you have like a hot screenwriter and a successful director, that doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't hurt your career, especially if you've built your career on not being nude in movies. And so a lot of actors had, established themselves as like, I already have a fan base. It did come down to, it got close to being Charlize Theron was almost cast, but she couldn't do the dancing. Man, you just think of the career she has, and you think of how bad Elizabeth Berkley was blacklisted post this movie. I mean, you wonder if Charlize Theron would have went on to win an Oscar for Monster. It came down to Elizabeth Berkley because she was willing to appear nude, and then also had experience as a dancer. She rehearsed a dance scene. They were like, this is the person that we're going to go with. Elizabeth Berkley really had only done television. She was new to the industry in a sense. She hadn't done any actual movies, but she was on a hit kids TV show, which was Saved by the Bell, which is something I grew up on. I think a lot of people coming into Showgirls had no clue who this person was. They just heard like, oh, she's on this like kids show that I don't watch. But I grew up on Saved by the Bell, and it is a very cheesy, kind of run of the mill.
Don't you shit talk
I'm not, but I'm just saying it is very cheesy. It's very kind of that era of like late 80s, early 90s sitcom style TV show that, had a low budget, generally had some, at each episode, there's like a, moral dilemma happening. There's always like some sort of special episode where, someone's thinking about suicide or someone's doing drugs or, there was an episode, I think that's made famous with Elizabeth Berkley where she is trying to,
she's trying to study and she's taking caffeine pills.
And she gets addicted to caffeine pills and has this like very over the top, dramatic moment where she has a total meltdown. I mean, Saved by the Bell was a big show, but mainly with kids. I don't know that anyone over the age of 20 was watching Saved by the Bell. So
until they went to the college years and prime time.
And so for her to make this jump, this leap from essentially a kid's show to a NC-17 movie where she's going to be naked through the whole movie, that made a lot of news. I mean, that was I think that was like the first time I'd read about Showgirls in a magazine. It was like, whoa, Elizabeth Berkley from Saved by the Bell is like going to do this movie where she's like naked through the whole thing. It's, I think that was like the first thing that got people's attention for Showgirls going into it. And Verhoeven had made Basic Instinct, and not, even though Sharon Stone had done a ton of movies, she'd been working for like 10 years, was in Total Recall. People didn't know her, by name. Like after Basic Instinct, she was pretty much like, it was a Sharon Stone movie, for the next like decade. So it didn't seem totally out of the ordinary to have someone that is new. It's like, oh, this movie's going to break Elizabeth Berkley and she's going to be, she's going to be a marquee name after Showgirls. As production started, there's a lot of up and down on retrospectively people talking about Showgirls and the style in which it was filmed. Like, did they mean to be over the top? Did, Verhoeven want her to act over the top? Did he watch dailies and say, hey, we need to tone it down? During the production of this, it seemed like they very much were going forward like normal. Everyone was happy with the performance that Elizabeth Berkley was giving. And the reason why I bring that up is because that seems to be the main criticism of the movie, is like people saying she's a bad actor and that she's so over the top and like unconvincing. From everything I've read, I mean, Verhoeven says that's how I wanted it. That's how I framed it. I told her to amp it up, several times. You can see a couple behind the scenes footage where, she's listening to him and he's like, no, you want to go crazy on this guy. And even people saying, I think he was, I don't remember if it was like a producer or who, they're like, man, the first like 10, 15 minutes of this, she's coming in pretty hot. It's like a very strong personality that may be unlikable to audiences. And he's like, no, that's what I want. I want her to be this sort of just in your face, unpredictable character.
Yeah. That was one of the editors that was like, do we want it to be this intense? Yeah, he intentionally wanted her to come through like this in her acting and her dancing. Like, look at the way that she is acting. It's the same in her dancing performances. It's the same of everything in Goddess. That's how everything is. And he said that this is what he was going for, was this staccato style of acting where it's like very exaggerated, extreme, like pushed to the breaking point, which is what Elizabeth Berkley's doing. And as someone who watched every season of Saved by the Bell, and then when I saw this and knowing that criticism of the film was like, wait a second, I've seen Elizabeth Berkley act for like the last 6 years of my life, and the woman can act, and she's playing a completely different character here, and she's consistent throughout the whole film. There's never any wavering in her performance, or does it seem lazy? Like, she's given 1,000% in this. And I like too that even though, throughout the years, Verhoeven's retrospective analysis of his own film like kind of wavers a little bit, the one thing that never changes is him saying, I wanted her to act that way. She did everything that she was directed to do. And the producers, it's like, yeah, that's what we were going for. So I know we're going to get to the criticism and reaction of the film a little bit later, but for the blame to go on her for this film, like always, oof, it's a rough one because she didn't deserve it.
And Verhoeven said when he got the first draft of Showgirls, he wasn't initially turned on by it because he felt that Esther House was doing what he did in Flashdance, which is more about the dancing, more about these productions that she does. And there's like a little bit of story in between of her life and her struggle. These movies are very similar, so I can understand. But what I find funny is that Verhoeven placed a lot of the movie, when you watch Showgirls, a lot of the production and time that they spent is huge show performances that are throughout the movie where there's these dance sequences, and they don't just show a minute of this. Like, there's several of the Vegas shows that are these big, huge filmed productions. I mean, they did like an entire number, and you see it from start to finish. It's like 3, 4, 5 minutes long. And there's several of these sequences where you're no longer watching these characters interacting with each other or anything about their lives with plot. It's just, you're just watching a Vegas show now. But when you see those sequences, they're so well made and so well choreographed. And a big part of this production was them spending months, choreographing these shows, putting them on, because these were shows that were supposed to exist in the universe of Showgirls, not necessarily, I've never seen a Vegas show, so I don't know how well the sequences in Showgirls compares to real Vegas shows. If anything, watching Showgirls, you'd be like, man, I want to see something like this. This is a really well-made production with like great dancers, and there's a theme going on, and there's special effects and pyrotechnics, fog. And it looks like something that you would see at like a really high-end rock concert. What Verhoeven does is shows the side of Vegas that we normally don't see in a lot of the production of this movie. Really gives you that inside look, because every other movie that you'd see in a Vegas is like inside the casino and people gambling, or like the pressures that go into making a casino work and someone losing all their money. And other than the very beginning, there's really no like casino scenes. There's no gambling in this movie. It's strictly, hey, I'm going to go catch one of those shows, and all that goes into it, and the cutthroatness of the industry is really highlighted. And so that's what I think I appreciate most about this movie, is the production that went into, let's show a side of Vegas that people haven't seen before. But even though we'll show the griminess of how people are treated and how cutthroat it is, we're also going to show these like high-end, beautifully shot sequences of the actual shows that they perform, which then makes you feel like, okay, I see why these people are working so hard to be in one of these shows, because when you see it, you're like, no, this is something different. This is actually like art. This is something that takes a lot of talent. Not anybody could get up there and do what they do, regardless of whether they're topless.
Yeah. That is such a very good point for this, is you have to know where they're trying to get and why it's so important, and why these dancers are trying to like be the best and be cutthroat and push somebody down the stairs if they need to. This stage setup that was in this fictional Stardust Hotel was actually a previous casino, the Sahara Casino in Lake Tahoe. They rented out this entire place, had to do a lot of rewiring and reinstalling for all of the special electrical specifications for this. But man, I have to say, one of the smartest things that this production could have done was hire lighting designer Peter Morse, who was the lighting designer for the Sahara Casino originally. So he knew all of the lights, he knew the stage setup, he knew how everything worked in this theater. And Morse wasn't a movie lighting guy. I mean, after this, of course, he is. And I can't help but think that along with the choreography, the lighting is so important to this. Along with being a beautifully shot movie, what would you say, like the stage performances make up at least 40 to 50% of the film?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
it feels like it.
I'd really forgotten how much of the movie is like you're just watching straight up show sequences.
Yeah, these lighting setups are just so cool. The contrasting colors that I think bring out the shapes of people's bodies like you've never really seen. At least, I mean, I've never seen a Vegas show, but everything in this just looks beautiful. The costuming by Ellen Moroznik, I think she also did the costuming in Basic Instinct as well. But everything really depends on not only the performances, but the lighting and the stage setups. One of my favorite aspects of the performances, too, is the fighting between Nomi and Crystal Connors through their dancing. It goes back to that staccato style of like aggression, but we're having it come out through the choreography. Marguerite Derricks was the choreographer of this film. There's so much. I mean, this is a production by itself. I mean, Showgirls did go on to be a musical, of course, but the fighting through dancing and this true sense of style and dance is extremely consistent throughout every performance, and it goes along with the over-the-top nature of the entire film.
In that sequence you're talking about, I never really think of Showgirls
like
as
the steampunk, like S&M biker.
Well, no, not that one, but the when they fight dance, like Nomi and Crystal, like it's almost like something like out of like the Beat It music video where they're or West Side Story where you know they're dancing but they're looking at each other like they're, you know, we're enemies but we're dancing next to each other like erotically, but it's
violent.
It's and I don't really think of Showgirls as a musical, but then when that scene comes on, it's like, oh, okay, this, I mean, again, it's like Verhoeven, like making this movie as a musical, as a more of a dance performance piece with a storyline sewn in throughout, but essentially that's what it is. This is like a musical dance movie. It's just a little more explicit than West Side Story or big musical number. This one, they just don't, you know, the difference with this is like no one breaks out in song. It's which I actually prefer. I prefer people to break out in dance versus break out in song.
Showgirls was something new as far as musicals go because there hadn't really been anything like it before. The dance style, the nudity, the subject matter, just as the show Goddess itself, what we see of it is, I mean, I want to see Goddess as a performance.
Well, and one of the sequences too where it's like this sort of like S&M theme, huge dance number, like someone drives across the stage on a motorcycle. I mean, it's a very big musical number, and again, it's where we see the entire performance, which I think makes sense, you know, because they all this production and planning and dedication and time and choreography went into these sequences. I'm glad that they didn't just show us like 20 seconds and then cut to the after the show scene. We're watching it as if it is a performance piece.
And Marguerite Derricks, the choreographer, said of Elizabeth Berkley and Gina Gershon that like they kind of got their asses whooped in this, but Berkley I think did a little better as far as being prepared, at least having a consistent dancing background. Gina Gershon said that she previously had a dancing background like 7 or 8 years prior, but really hadn't gotten back into that in quite some time. But the one thing that she knew is that she did not want a stand-in. So it was really rough on her. She said a couple times that she couldn't even go upstairs after a while. She was just in so much pain. And there's one scene, I forget which sequence it's in, where some dancers have her by her legs and her hands and are kind of throwing her up in the air but holding on to her like she's a sheet, and the way that her body is moving every time, it looks so painful to me. And thinking about someone who's not used to dancing going through this, the physical torment that she must have gone through for those like 3-4 weeks of rehearsal and filming. Woof.
Yeah, there's so much of that in movies that you don't think about, whether it be like a Western and someone being able to mount a horse realistically and training for 3 months so that they can do one little shot of them hopping on a horse like they've done it 1,000 times. And, you know, everything down to like race car driving or any, you know, there's so much that goes into the production rehearsal of this, and specifically this movie of like, you know, you can't have a movie about Showgirls and then cut to a shot of someone that does not look confident in doing one of these like crazy dance moves, you know.
And having a stand-in in something like this, like these shots aren't from far away. It's very intimate.
Yeah.
And while I bet this show would look awesome from far away, we're seeing it up close and personal, which is adding to the whole narrative of the story.
Well, let's stop there. We'll go to another clip from Showgirls, but we'll come back. We'll talk about the cast, and we'll talk about the release and critical, crazy reception that this movie got, and how it's found a new life and new audience.
I don't know what all this stuff is.
I'll order for you.
Don't they have brown rice and vegetables?
Do you like brown rice and vegetables?
Yeah,
You do.
sort of.
Really?
It's worse than dog food. It is.
I've had dog food.
You have?
Long time ago. Doggy chow. Oh, I used to love doggy chow.
I used to love doggy chow too. I get a headache from champagne.
Oh, this isn't champagne. This is holy water. I named myself after this holy water. Crystal Connors used to have ginger brown hair and little bitty tits. It's amazing what paint and a surgeon can do.
So I was thinking about the cast of a lot of Verhoeven movies, and really aside from Total Recall, where the movie is built around Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a household name at that point, most of his movies are the main actors or a lot of character actors aren't household names. Mm-hmm. They're, dedicated actors like RoboCop. I don't know that Peter Weller, people knew him by name, and some of the villains, or like, Basic Instinct, of course, people knew Michael Douglas, but Sharon Stone was like a relatively new name. And the same thing with Showgirls. We've got Elizabeth Berkley that we talked about a little bit, but, Gina Gershon wasn't very well known. And the rest of the cast is, I think like maybe you like recognize faces, but for the most part, again, he's using, building a cast that's not recognizable by name. And I think this movie would have played differently if it would have been someone who was super well known. I don't know. It's like
you mean as the lead?
As the lead, yeah. Like I like the idea that we have, who is this, Elizabeth Berkley? In such a revealing and very like intimate performance of someone that's got to be nude essentially. I mean, I would say 50% of this movie, but then also play such a character that is so biting and off the wall a lot of the times. This performance it's over the top, and I don't think it's campy. Do I think it's like the best performance ever? Do I think that some criticisms were missing the mark? I mean, I don't think Elizabeth Berkley is like this incredible actor, but I don't think she's a bad actor, and I don't think this performance is terrible in any way whatsoever. She's giving Verhoeven what he wanted, and I think that a lot of the fun of this movie is the erraticness of her character. And the more I watch the movie too, the more I see Nomi's character as being a lot like a real character, in the sense that she is very contradictory. She'll get very upset about someone suggesting that she's whoring herself out. Like, I'm not like that. That's not what I do. And there's this idea of like she's working a strip club, and Crystal says, if you're working at that strip club, what you're doing, I don't know what it is, but it's not dancing. And she gets very, very upset, and she's willing to throw everything away. She's so dedicated to wanting to do this, but then the person who could open the door for her, she's willing to be like, you don't know anything, and just like scream in their face. But then she'll, on the same token, will sleep with Kyle MacLachlan's character to ease her way into getting to the top. And so there's a lot of up and down with her. But again, I think that's part of a real character. That's someone who's a little bit damaged, and someone who changes their mind in a heartbeat. And that's a part of real life. I think that's a lot of what this character embodies, is this really live wire of a person who is so determined and is just like, can't see beyond what they want, what they're after. And they don't want to look back. They don't want to look at the past, because it's just heartache and like people that have let them down, or people that have abused them. And you don't see that in the beginning of the movie with her character, but as time goes by, and as you watch the movie, I think a few times, you see those layers early on in the film of like, this person has been really damaged. This person has really taken a lot of abuse, and they are not going to take shit off of anybody. Like, if they feel like there's even the little bit, even if they're feeling a little bit disrespected, they'll call somebody out. They don't care if they're going to lose the job over it. They don't care if someone's going to think that she's crazy or an asshole. She'll let them know how she feels. And it's kind of refreshing in some ways, because you don't really see that too often, especially in a character that we're following for an entire movie that we're supposed to really care about and really root for, because a lot of the times in this movie, you're not really rooting for Nomi. You're just, in some ways, you're like kind of confused by the difference between her passion and how she's willing to step on somebody to get to the top.
Nomi is a magnet for trouble. No matter what happens to her, she is kind of all over the place. Nothing is small or ever boring with her. She's a mystery. Like you said in the beginning, she's a mystery. But people don't see her in the way that she sees herself, which is a star. No matter whether she is doing lap dances or whatever she has to do, she's making dancing her priority, and she's willing to do anything to get there. One thing that is kind of always blown me away about how people treat the character of Nomi is that everyone's willing to do anything for her. Like Molly, her friend, James, the bouncer, dancer that she meets who's trying to get her to be in his show and also sleep with her. Like a lot of people are trying to advance themselves in order to help her, but for being such an aggressive, touchy, ready to pop off type of character, it's hilarious to me that everyone's wants to help out Nomi. I think she does come to the movie with some sense of innocence in a way, not in like the way that Naomi Watts shows up to Mulholland Drive with stars in her eyes and ready to be like that. There is a sense of lived-inness with the character of Nomi. We don't know anything about her until the end of the film, which is when we fully understand, oh, you came from a messed up household and your dad killed himself and killed your mom and you were a prostitute and this and that. We finally understand Nomi by the end of the film. But the progression of her character, to me, it goes along with everyone else in the movie, which is opportunistic, but there is something redeeming about her character, which is why we still hang with her. Also because I don't think you can watch this movie and not feel crappy for women and what they have to go through, at least in the portrayal of this Las Vegas scene, which I bet is not far off from reality.
In the Verhoeven interviews that I read, I didn't hear him mention this, but to me, the way that he really, I think, like in his movies is either criticizing, antagonizing or satirizing American culture. In this movie, it very much feels like the way Nomi is treated and the way that these women are subjected in Showgirls by the people that are in charge feels really like a commentary on what you've read about time and time again about the casting process of women in the 80s and 90s and how sleazy some of these producers were, and the promise of like, I'll make you a star, but you gotta, do something for it. You gotta come to my hotel room late at night and massage my back and whatever. And you get a glimpse of the real sleazeballness of, I'm putting on a show here and I'm wearing a suit, but I'm also can say really disgusting things and treat you like a piece of meat.
And in that sense, Nomi's story is about a survivor, someone who battles all of these situations and has probably endured many instances of trading sexual favors for getting ahead. I wanted to ask you this a second ago. After post-coital interaction between she and Kyle MacLachlan's Zach character, do you think that there's a sense of she actually thinks that like they could be a couple? Or do you think that she's using him just as he's using her? I mean, what is he using her for, though?
To me, it's more of, I see them using each other at this point because he's actually like relatively, the only person that's like relatively nice to her in the beginning and, lets her know like, hey, you're saying Versace wrong. Even in the scene where Gina Gershon's like buying him the lap dance from Nomi, he's just like, come on, what are you doing? Like, this is, he sees it as being a little bit degrading. It is kind of a weird character switch that, he then, is so mean to her later on. But a lot of it, I kind of feel like is that he was in power and after she used him, he didn't like the fact that, she's like, no, I used you. I don't want a relationship with you. And I feel like, at least to me, like it looked like the intention of her character was there to, she's replacing Gina Gershon in his life because Gina Gershon was, his starlet, and she wants access to that. So she's willing to sleep with him. But yeah, I don't feel like there was like a, hey, we're going to start dating and, you're going to be my boyfriend. It feels very much like she saw the steps of what Gina Gershon had to do. And she's like, I'm going to put myself into all those places, be the person of interest, be the person that is the hot buzz in town, and then drop those people when I need to, because she really, it's clear, I think, that she cares about one thing, and that's like making her way to the top, whatever she has to do as long as she doesn't feel like someone's disrespecting her. That character is a constant battle of like, she is using people and trying to make her way to the top, but it still doesn't, but you see that other side of her character too, of like, yeah, this is someone who is still like running from a bad situation. That's what pushed her to come to Vegas in the first place.
So in a sense, she's using her sexuality or her sexual nature as like a monetary transaction, just as everybody else is, but she wants to be the one in charge. And that's the only way that she can retain her independence and her autonomy until she's finally exposed, and there her character arc starts. You know, I know we need to move on in the cast, but it needs to be brought up a little bit in the way that Nomi is the new starlet in Vegas and up and coming. Elizabeth Berkley, like we said, this was her breakout role into film. And for as much as she had to do, like show her entire body, dance naked, I mean, everything, the amount of confidence that would take is astounding to me, really. And to do it in front of a whole crew of people. She said that the experience was totally fine. Like she never felt weird or creeped out or anything like that. But for that, she was only paid $100,000.
I was so shocked when I saw that. It's like, whoa.
I can't. For you were on the cover of the film, which the cover of this movie, the movie poster, I think is really gorgeous. But $100,000 to be the face of this movie, show everything, put it all out there, and give such a extreme performance.
And the conditioning, man. The conditioning and the training and the rehearsing that went into a movie like this. And I think this is a constant argument in Hollywood of like, until you've proven that you're a moneymaker, you know, you're not going to get paid. But this does seem like, for the risk that she was taking, seemed like a very low amount of money to get paid. And then on top of it all, the backlash that she got from, you know, committing herself to this film.
And we'll get to that shortly here. But the other side of Nomi, who Nomi is aspiring to be like the goddess herself. Gina Gershon playing Crystal Connors. I mean, Elizabeth Berkley's performance is great, I think, in Showgirls, but Gina Gershon, she's a show stealer for me. She's probably my favorite as far as performances in this film, in the sense that Crystal Connors doesn't need to go through too many changes really to be the pinnacle, the ultimate starlet that she is. But I like where her character dynamic is with Nomi, and the fighting back and forth, whether it's the passive-aggressive fighting or the dance fighting, from being confrontational to demeaning to, I mean, flirtatious. I mean, I'm not crazy, right? Like, she probably would have slept with Nomi, right?
Yeah,
and she's pissed at Zach because he slept with her first.
Well, and I do think that she's the most interesting character in this movie because she's already made it. You know, she's at the top, but then her relationship with Nomi almost is like it's almost like a military trainee, like, I'm going to tear you down so that I can build you up and make you as strong as me or better, you know, because you're going to, you know, essentially be the person that is going to have to lead people and be in charge. But she also has another side where it's just like she's like a cat playing with a mouse. When you see her go to the strip club and seeing Nomi dance, the way everyone else, if you just watch the scene, you know, there's guys in suits, Kyle MacLachlan's there, everyone's drinking, they're having a good time. They're really just like, hey, we're here. It's just a regular old night. But Gina Gershon's face is like focused on Nomi, and she's like got like a sinister look on her face, but she's also watching her performance, and she's very in tune to it, almost like it's like a very cunning look, and like I'm formulating a plan, and I want to get back at this person too because they called me out, but I also like respect the fact that she called me out. You know, there's a lot of nuance, I think, to her character instead of just being a seductress, you know. And the more I watch it, the more I feel like I would have loved to have spent more time with Gina Gershon's Crystal Connors character and seeing kind of where she was at. I mean, she kind of drops out of the movie once she gets knocked down a flight of stairs, but up until that point, all the scenes where she's going toe-to-toe with Nomi are, to me, the most entertaining and interesting parts of the movie.
The power dynamic, the lustful sizing each other up, and Are they rivals? Do they have a crush on each other? Why is it that Crystal Connors leads Nomi on only to rip her down again? It is to build her up, because she does see that she can be her successor in a way. And I like that they present Crystal Connors as this, I don't want to say aging starlet, but age, like in All About Eve. It is a theme in this, but it's more about her seeing herself reflected in Nomi. And speaking of reflection, the interactions that we have with Nomi and Crystal, and sometimes Molly, using Nomi's mirror at her station, like behind the scenes, her makeup and getting ready station. I love those scenes. They're just so visually interesting, and no one is moving, but the interplay using mirrors, I just love the way that it looks. One more thing for me on Gina Gershon. Is it just me, or does Gina Gershon, could you make her character a drag queen and it would be the same thing? I really feel like she is so just the tip top of perfect starlet, and the dramatic sensibility, as well as the kind of cunning, a little predatory, snarky, and cutting. Like, everything about her just screams like a drag queen with the most charisma that you've ever seen on stage. To me, anyway. And I think Gina Gershon knows it, too. She definitely knows exactly what she's doing.
To me, like, the entire performance she gives, and I think in a lot of movies, she has that look on her face of like, I know I'm it. I know that I'm attractive and that people are interested in me, and I know how to handle it.
In everything she does, ever.
I mean, it probably had been like 20 years since the last time I'd watched Showgirls before we decided that we were going to start approaching this to possibly do as an episode. And I'd kind of honestly forgotten that Kyle MacLachlan was a big part of this movie. And it was interesting watching him in this, because I'm really just used to seeing him in either playing like a little bit of an oddball character, or like even like a little like nerdy type character. And in this one, he comes at first, being very, he's like just nice, but then essentially has like a total flip and is just really, really vindictive. But this is the first movie I've seen him in that I could remember where, it's like he like comes off as like this really handsome, wealthy, like in control type character. I'm just used to see, like, I just always used to see him like playing this sort of similar role, and this seemed like a little bit outside of what I think we're like used to seeing him play. Very effective too, because there's a moment there where you're like, oh, he's nice to Nomi, and this is going to be the moment in the movie where it switches, and she's getting into the industry, and now people are going to start treating him with respect, and then you're just, that door like gets slammed in your face like within like 20 minutes of her making it, with him basically like digging into her past and bringing it up and throwing it in her face.
And if you can remove your emotions from it, I mean, he's the entertainment director of the Stardust Hotel. I kind of get that he's like pissed about this, about not knowing about her past, but the way that he deals with it really shows his true colors. And also, this is where he expressly says, you are our property now, and you're going to do what we say. You're part of this. There's no way out of this. You're going to make us a lot of money. And basically, this is the moment that he's saying you're a whore, just the way that Crystal Connors has been saying the whole time. He's just not saying it directly.
And basically, like, you're going to help us cover up a violent rape because the guy that we're protecting is more important to us than your friend that, is letting you stay at her house.
In case it needs to be said, the piggishness of men is all over this film. I don't think that there's one male character in the film that doesn't do something shitty to Nomi or to Molly or anyone. There's a little bit of sympathy for the James character played by Glenn Plummer. He's the former bouncer but dancer that wants to take Nomi under his wing and teach her a few things, but he comes in so cocky and so aggressive towards her that it's coming out of jealousy. That's pretty obvious. He's jealous that she's advancing and leaving him behind. But I mean, their friendship is based in nothing. And for him to take it so personally, it's just like, dude, back off a little bit. The way that Nomi treats James is completely understandable. There is an aspect of his character that's we feel a little bit of sympathy for, and also what Nomi is trying to avoid, which is settling. When James knocks up Nomi's former co-worker at the Cheetah, the strip club Cheetah, Penny, after he knocks her up, he's like, well, nobody wants to see my show anyway, so now that she's pregnant, we're just gonna do this, and I'm giving up my dreams, basically. That is exactly what Nomi's trying to avoid, is this idea of settling that she sees Penny doing and that she sees James doing, which is why she knows, okay, this is what I have to leave in the dust. It's nice to have that closure to that relationship, but James wasn't better than any other man in this movie, in my opinion.
James is the worst. He's like the part of this movie that just like, I can't, it's so hard to like.
He's even worse than Kyle MacLachlan.
He's just, well, because he's so pushy. He's so annoying. He's so clingy. And then, he's the worst in this movie. And, to go back to your statement about, all the men in this movie, I mean, granted, they do offer James a little bit of sympathy toward the end there, but it was just at the top of my head of like, God, man, every guy in this movie is just the total beast going after Nomi or like using her or trying to use her for something.
I think the pinnacle of that is what happens to the Molly Abrams character played by Gina Rivera. Molly, like I said before, is the most innocent, true-hearted, good person in this film. She's Nomi's rock. There's no good reason that she needed to help Nomi, but she did. I mean, she literally rescues Nomi in the beginning from getting hit by a car. She's always positive. She's always trying to help. There's a sweetness there. And I think because of her earnest behavior, I want to believe in their friendship, even though she's better than Nomi in that sense. Like, she's clearly giving more to the friendship than Nomi is. But I think Nomi is appreciative of her. And it's not until Nomi's final character arc where we see this redemption, really, for Nomi recognizing not only has she been exposed for her past and who she is, and now she's owned by the Stardust Hotel. Now her friend, her best friend, the only person who stood by her side, has been raped, and no one's going to do anything about it. So the only thing that Nomi can do is get revenge, and it is some sweet ass revenge that she gets. Molly deserves a little bit more when Nomi does get revenge, because that rape scene is pretty brutal.
Yeah, the retaliation isn't quite as brutal as the rape scene itself.
You get the emphasis of it by watching Elizabeth Berkley's performance, but I want to see a spiked heel go into that guy's face, honestly,
Well, to round out the cast, I wanted to just mention briefly Robert Davi, who plays the owner of the Cheetah. If you're into B movies and character actors like I am, it's great to see Robert Davi show up in this movie because he is always realistically playing a villainy, scumbaggy type character, but he also has like a very realistic character actor B movie look to him. You'll see him pop up in like the tiniest little terrible B movie like Maniac Cop Part 3, but then he'll be the villain in a James Bond movie, and then you see him here really doing what he does best. I mean, very convincingly playing a scumbag, but also having, to me, like the weirdest line in the entire movie. He says it in such a sympathetic, perplexed way to Nomi after he goes to see her. She's made it. He sees this like performance at a high-end hotel that's like the opposite of the Cheetah that he owns. And it's like the only thing that he can come up with is it's weird, that must be weird not to have someone come on you. It's like, what? What? That's what you got out of this. But again, coming from Robert Davi and his character, it's just like somehow fits, even though to me it's the most like bizarre line confusion in the movie.
I mean, I laugh at that line, but I feel like that's what that guy would say, Another line, just to bring this up line-wise, lines that stand out, it always gets brought up the dog food conversation, eating dog food conversation that happens between Nomi and Crystal, that people think, what a weird thing to say. I think it happens kind of naturally in that conversation. And as someone whose brother had her eat dog food many times as a child.
And that particular scene in that dialogue is like, I think what makes this movie so unique and bizarre.
And while that strange conversation is happening, what is silently happening is this power dynamic, this power shift of watching them be equals and Nomi realizing this could be me, and Crystal going, I have to make sure this woman stays in her place because she's coming for me.
Well, we should probably move on to the moment that really I think is what everybody talks about with Showgirls is the reception. For the longest time, I mean, this was on the list of like worst movies ever made, like biggest Hollywood disasters. When you look back at it, it really wasn't that big of a disaster. I mean, it didn't make its money back, but there's like a million movies since then that haven't made their money back, and where the marketing for like some of these big budget movies was more than the entire cost of Showgirls. But I think right off the bat, this movie had a hard road to be a success because you have this NC-17 stamp like we talked about, which was really going to hurt the movie's performance and getting into as many theaters as it could have been if it was rated R. Though I thought that poster was unique, that they did. It didn't really show anything other than it was like all black, and then it's like her leg and her almost naked body. I mean, you see the entirety. It's like a side profile. Didn't really give you an idea of what this movie was, and it did look like more of like something that would be on a porn poster than a major motion picture. Though it might have been like enticing or something or titillating, it didn't really, the poster just didn't give you a sense of like, what is going on in this movie? What is this about? And then the taglines that they came up with also didn't do the movie any favors. It just didn't sound like something that's like, hey, I'm going to get some people together and go see this movie this weekend.
For being marketed as the most erotic movie you've ever seen, it is the opposite of that. It's not sexy. For as many naked people as there are in it, there is nothing that is erotic about this film, to me anyway. But there was a massive, overwhelming buzz about the film. It was touted as this is going to be an expose on Vegas showgirl life, and it wasn't that. Verhoeven did have final cut of the film, and he didn't show it to anybody before the initial release. And about a week before, the editors came to him and were like, you sure there's nothing you want to talk about or anything that we could change or do? And he was just dead set on the cut that he wanted was going to be it. And audiences didn't get what they were sold.
Yeah, and to me, it was such an odd choice to market this as some like, this is going to be the most erotic movie you've ever seen. Because it's like during this time in the 90s, like people were already calling Cinemax Skinemax. Yeah. And there was like Red Shoe Diaries and all these like sort of made for cable erotica that you could watch in the privacy of your own home. I think the audience that's looking to see the most erotic movie that they've ever seen, they're not want to go to like the AMC down the street from their house and watch it, so it's like they were priming this movie for failure because it was like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff you want to say, like rent this movie and make sure your parents aren't home when you watch it. Not, hey, it just isn't a tagline to sell for people that want to buy a bunch of popcorn and soda and like sit in a major chain movie theater for 2 hours.
It felt like audiences kind of went puritanical really overnight. And I think in the mid-90s, even though we had a lot of movies that were dealing with sex or thrillers or anything to do with power dynamic, I keep thinking of Disclosure. I don't know why, but like that was a hot topic as far as like sex in the mid-90s. And for some reason, Showgirls, just people were immediately rebuffed to it. And I think that it's kind of unfair because it went with just immediately critics panning it. I think that it was too raw. It showed a snapshot of what was supposed to be depicted as, real life that people didn't want to see. You don't want to see the seedy underbelly of women being abused in Vegas showgirl life and, dealing with a life that's, I bet it's weird to not have a guy come on you. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a bizarre world to enter, and it's not an uplifting story. It's hard to watch a film where the only redeeming character gets raped. She gets punished for being the most innocent one, and everyone else is kind of like not the greatest person.
the reception of this movie now is like, this is a fun movie to watch in a crowd. You know, there's all these revival theaters that are doing like, you know, 1,000 people show up and they're cheering at the screen, and it's this big fun movie to watch. And that's kind of how it's presented now in retrospect of like, hey, we're going to go out and see Showgirls in the crowd and it's going to be a fun night. And it just like was almost like pitched in the reverse way for an audience, you know, as a cinematic experience in 1995.
And I do believe Verhoeven when he says that his intentions were always supposed to be over the top. I think that American audiences just didn't get it. I don't know. Is it because the movie is supposed to be based in reality and it's not something that's a superhero movie or something that's blatantly over the top that they're expecting it? Can you accept something like that? Or is it just straight up the puritanical nature of getting your panties in a ruffle over nudity? Is it that we're not used to seeing full frontal nudity in movies, I mean, repeatedly in 1995? I don't know.
Also, now that it's more celebrated by an audience, I feel like critically people are unafraid to not bash this movie. And when you look at some of the critical reviews of this movie, I mean, they're so mean-spirited and they just attack time and time again, attack Elizabeth Berkley. Like, it's almost like everybody else that had anything to do with this movie came out unscathed, but Elizabeth Berkley just became the butt of every review, the joke, the sole proprietor of why this movie it was like hated.
Never mind that this movie was done by male producers, male writer, male director. Nope, none of that. It's all Elizabeth Berkley's fault. It's completely unfair. There's a clip on YouTube of her doing a screening like 20 years later, and she's saying how she never got to experience this film with a crowd that appreciated it, that liked it. And it was just something that, I mean, it was a friggin' drag. It really affected her career in such a profoundly negative way. Rena Riffel, who played Polly, said that, you know, she thought that the more uninhibited you could be meant that you were being a really great actor. But it seemed like the movie was being punished by the media and the public, and it just seemed completely so unfair. For years, Berkley was reminded of this role, and it was just nothing but pain for her. People wanted to talk about it, and it wasn't something she wanted to be really reminded of. I don't think that she hated the movie by any means, because the experience of making the movie, I haven't heard anyone talk negatively about it. I think that she thought she got an awesome opportunity and she gave it her all, which is totally true. Verhoeven's always contended that he loved her performance. The producers have always said this, that's like what it was supposed to be, that if the movie failed in any way, it wasn't on Elizabeth Berkley's shoulders. And I found a clip of Elizabeth Berkley talking about when this being a really dark period in her life where pretty much no one came to her defense, which was true. It seemed to be like the thing to hop on the bandwagon of beating her down, that one of the only people that came to her defense was Goldie Hawn, which was why her next role was in The First Wives Club, that Hawn came to her and not necessarily took her under her wing or anything, but just saw this as being completely unfair and that being dragged down, Berkley didn't deserve it. And yeah, she didn't. But it was almost like the public couldn't separate Elizabeth Berkley from her character. Verhoeven said, I think he tried to flip that idea in saying that proved that her performance was great in that way, that people couldn't separate it. But I don't know. I think it comes down to the fact that Americans are just uptight and we're okay with seeing heads chopped off and violence than we are people dancing nude.
And finally, I was going to say, if you're unfamiliar with the Razzies, they don't exist anymore. But for the longest time, the Razzies were sort of the antithesis of the Oscars. And so they handed out awards for like worst actor, worst scene, worst movie. I think now they realize how mean-spirited that was because you're kicking people when they're down, essentially, in the industry. So naturally, no one showed up for these things, because they're like, I'm annoyed that you're, it's like insulting.
Yeah.
Paul Verhoeven is like the only director that's ever shown up to receive his award. And
I think it was really shocking, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think like they were like, what's happening? Like he's coming to show up, and he showed up for Showgirls, and and he says this is the movie of his that he can rewatch, because it's one of those few movies that he said he got to do exactly what he wanted. He had final cut. He had final say on everything. He directed it how he wanted. The performances were how he wanted. And he also says that, I'd rather a movie be celebrated for being bad than like just drift off into obscurity, like millions and millions of movies that, no one saw, even, or if they heard it was bad, only a few people saw it, and then it ends up in a dollar bin somewhere. We talk about this all the time with movies because every movie that we cover is 20, 30 years old. And it's constantly fascinating to me what time will do for movies, because so many of these movies we've talked about on this podcast weren't appreciated when they came out. And then 20, 30 years down the road, people start saying like, man, that's a good movie. Like, I can't believe people saw it a certain way. And on the flip side of that, there's a lot of movies nowadays that, like American Beauty, which was celebrated with the most prestigious awards that can be given for a film. And that movie's now been evaluated like, oh my God, what were people thinking? Like, this is, I can't believe like we were celebrating a movie that like sexualizes, underage girls with a man who's like over 40. And how pretentious, like this movie's like so pretentious now.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting to me. Like, I love how time will sometimes work its magic, and we go back and look back and say, you know what, this movie is better than I remembered it, or maybe I should check this out. And I still think this is a movie that people are not seeing because of its reputation. They heard it was the worst movie ever made, and they're like, why do I want to waste my time on something that I've heard so many people say is terrible? And so if anything, hopefully if you listen to this podcast and you still haven't seen Showgirls, go look into it with an open mind. I'd almost actually suggest people watch the documentary You Don't Know Me before watching Showgirls if you've never seen it, because it really does make a really great case for this movie being reconsidered as a movie that's not a piece of trash, that's not a throwaway film, something to look at and have fun with, not just disregard as, this accident that happened in 1995.
It's like $43 million accident. I love that there was a small sect that has now grown into a large cult of folks who resurrected this movie, a movie that spoke to survivors, to people that loved movies that are campy, to outsiders of every kind, and appreciate the exaggerated hyperbolic sensibilities that exist within this movie. Because I think it's so short-sighted to say, like, any review, when I was going back through and like reading some of the scathing reviews that say nothing at all positive about it, I just have to say, okay, if you hate the story, hate the performances, just look at it without the sound on. Like, you can't say that it is a bad movie across the board, because it's not. And if you actually take a second and throw away your puritanical ideals, there actually is a lot of merit behind this movie, and allow yourself to think outside of the box that we've become so accustomed to with mainstream Hollywood movies. And also, while Elizabeth Berkley, it took her a while to climb back, and it really did, but it wouldn't be until she started doing some off-Broadway, Broadway parts. She had a part in an Eddie Izzard comedy, Woody Allen film. I remember her from The L Word. I mean, her character in The L Word's pretty memorable. And then she had various TV roles. But think about the time period, too. When you are a TV star that then went to movies, like, that's the impossible jump. But then at that time, when you get then relegated back to television, that was the kiss of death. Nowadays, it doesn't even matter. Like, so many things about this movie, 30 years later, it wouldn't be NC-17. There's no way, I don't think Elizabeth Berkley would have been panned for this performance. And I think maybe we're at least a little bit more advanced to appreciate the artistic merit that resides within Showgirls. And if you don't believe me, go to a group screening of this film and just watch how much people enjoy it. And I don't mean just making fun of it. Like I said in the beginning, I've never watched this movie to make fun of it. It is an experience, and it is just something that's outlandish and off the wall and just exaggerated kind of fun for dealing with such a seedy underbelly.
I totally agree. Well, let's stop there. Let's talk about our picks of the week. But we'll come back for some final thoughts on Showgirls. Lindsay, it was such a pleasure to see Bound with you. It was like such a unique experience to see that with a really excited crowd. Probably one of the few movies that you've done as pick of the week that I'm the most familiar with that I just watched recently. But what can you tell us about Bound?
Gina Gershon steals the show in so many films. I don't think it's intentional on her part, but I just can't look away when she's in a movie. How she adapts her look, her smoldering voice, even her nonverbal cues speak volumes about each one of her characters' motivations. And Bound was my introduction to her and might still be my most favorite performance of hers. Plus, being the next film after she did Showgirls, the remarkably stark difference between her performances, it's just nothing short of awesome. This was the feature film debut for the Wachowski siblings, best known for writing and directing the Matrix series, V for Vendetta, or Cloud Atlas. But Bound is probably their most underseen film. Obviously, these siblings love complicated stories, and while Bound is more straightforward, the inner workings of the plot and character impulses keep steadily becoming more layered throughout this tension builder of a neo-noir thriller. We stay in one location for Bound. 2 Chicago lofts that share a wall. On one side, there's Violet, played by Jennifer Tilly, the girlfriend of mafioso middleman money launderer Caesar, played by Joe Pantoliano. Violet's never been happy with this life. The violence she witnesses, she's being used as a perfect trophy mafia girlfriend. But she gets hers by gaining financial perks out of this loveless relationship. But one elevator ride with a handyman ex-con named Corky, Gina Gershon, is about to cause Violet to shamelessly make a life-changing move. And I'm not just talking about switching teams. If the ethereal concept of gaydar truly exists, Violet and Corky immediately vibe off each other as soon as they lock eyes, and Violet shamelessly runs with it, while Corky's not looking to rock her probationary post-prison status, so she's got to wait for Violet to make the first move. The movie quickly kicks into gear as Violet makes every excuse to get closer to Corky in very little time. Soon, the two get intimate, further encouraging Violet's desire to shake free of her mafia life with Caesar. With their seemingly solid connection locked in, Violet unveils her plan to Corky. She knows Caesar's bringing $2 million of embezzled mafia money back to the apartment to hand over to Chicago crime lord Gino Marzoni. Violet's got an idea, but Corky's the brains behind the action and fully realizes the dangers of ripping off the mob. If they're going to do this, everything's got to be foolproof. Sure, this plot feels somewhat familiar, but not with these twists, escalation, and degrees of increasing machismo and paranoia at the hands of Pantoliano. Every character in this story is a product of the noise they've created, and now Violet and Corky want to break free of their bonds and self-made traps. Plus, no stories like this have ever involved a realistic lesbian relationship, even if it does start up rather quickly. But hey, speaking from experience, that can be a true-to-form real-life stereotype. Bound challenges not only the trust between characters, but also who we, the audience, trust. Corky has no reason to trust this busty, beautiful, oozing with sexuality neighbor asking her to screw over the mob, but it perfectly creates so much build-up and tension. With Corky's confidence and follow-through vision, plus their combined lust for each other, the blind trust takes hold in this crafty little plot. Once they hatch the plan, the clock is ticking and they presumably won't see each other until they have the money, or unless something goes wrong with their plan before they can rendezvous. On top of being a fresher-than-most take on this age-old crime story, the Wachowskis play with visuals in a delicious way, meaning you're totally aware that a shot is gorgeous or displays simple ingenuity, but it doesn't take you out of the film, it just enhances it. Watch for how they stylishly use blood and white paint or white shirts with blood as bold visuals. Some more striking high-drama visualizations the Wachowskis use are via Bill Pope's cinematography. Extreme close-ups where the camera quickly follows a landline phone cord between Corky and Violet's neighboring apartments, as if this moment that the phone rings could have a massive impact. They're so close, but both stuck in their confines, maintaining their composure until they're able to covertly steal the money. Physically apart, yet connected by this phone line. It's such dramatic urgency. Another one that they play with is breaking the illusion of having a set by having the camera literally positioned at the ceiling level, seemingly almost flirtatiously going from Corky's apartment to Violet's, showing how close they are, but so far away from completing their plan, ending with both women putting their hands up to the wall as if to touch one another through it. I mean, it's just some great old style like movie drama that could be cheesy if done in less capable hands and with less believable actors. Speaking of believability, I have to give it to the Wachowskis too for using a feminist author and sex educator to choreograph the tastefully done sex scene, because it could have easily been gratuitous and meant for a solely male audience, and it's totally not. The chemistry between Gershon and Tilly is palpable and what sells the movie. Tilly embodies this sex pot look, very glamorized in sleek black numbers, sometimes draped in a black leather jacket or only in black lace. And Gershon, I mean, the simplicity of her costuming, like dirty work pants, tight white shirts, leather jacket, throw in a perfectly fitted Henley shirt. Gershon flawlessly pulls off being a butch lesbian. And right after being Crystal Connors in Showgirls, well, you know, now that I think about it, Crystal was kind of secretly butch, just in a very glamorous way. And I can't forget Joey Pants here. Pantoliano, he's paranoid, semi-pathetic nature is accented by this machismo aggression. He's just ready to pop off at any second. And it suits him very well as an actor. Whether controlled or unwieldy, he always delivers. And for a character who feels like he's got no options left, who ends up making the worst choices possible, he does an incredible job in this role. This is an iconic movie for the LGBT community, with two trans siblings behind bound steering wheel guiding this lusty, well-crafted, scheming crime story to an end that is honestly pretty awesome and semi-unexpected, especially if you're familiar with what happens to at least one gay character in most movies. I also forget how intentionally and unassumingly funny the script can be at times. It's just not something you would normally expect from a neo-noir thriller from the 90s. Criterion is releasing Bound 4K Blu-ray coming up in June, just in time for Pride Month, and you know that this guy over here can't wait to snag a copy.
Yeah, I hadn't seen the movie since the 90s, and when we went and saw it, the first thing that struck me was how visually interesting the movie was, and it had that real first filmmaker energy of like, let's follow the phone cord line and like do all these like, you know, interesting and unique camera angles. And I love Bill Pope's probably one of my favorite cinematographers of the 90s. Excited for that Blu-ray to come out. I'm going to have to snag that myself.
Yeah, I'm curious what's on it. All right, Justin, it's your turn. Tell us about your pick of the week.
So again, my pick was Starship Troopers, which very much like Showgirls was a movie that sort of misunderstood and panned when it came out. And years later, it was reevaluated. A lot of people, I guess, thought the movie was like Nazi sympathizing when Starship Troopers came out and was like all about fascism. And it was anything but. It was, if anything, it was satirizing fascism. The movie takes place a couple hundred years in the future, and planet Earth is no longer run by the government. It's no longer run by democracy. It is run by the military. The movie really shows like this sort of propaganda of like there's a division between citizens and people that want to join the military and join the fight against these very it's like these gigantic spiders. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but they're an alien life form that's highly intelligent, but also like highly volatile and violent. And there's millions of them. So there's this constant battle to fight these arachnid aliens, and also pushing the agenda that if you're not fighting for the military, you need to be in the sidelines, and you also don't have you're restricted on what you can do as far as like being a citizen. And so the movie starts off kind of like laying the groundwork for that, but then eventually lands on a group of characters that are friends, and they're all leaving high school to join the military. There's Casper Van Dien, there's Dina Meyer, Denise Richards, and Neil Patrick Harris. The main focus is on Johnny Rico, played by Casper Van Dien. He kind of only wants to join the military because he's in a relationship with Denise Richards, and she wants to be a pilot. She scored really high on her test. So did Neil Patrick Harris. He joins reluctantly against his parents' wishes and gets infantry, which is kind of like the most violent, dangerous job that you can get. They sort of set up in a way of like it's noble, but yet you're probably going to end up getting killed, and it's not like an intellectual job in the military, and you're probably not going to move up in the ranks. But he actually does move up in the ranks. He becomes a squad leader and still tries to maintain his relationship with Denise Richards, but she ends up falling for another pilot who's training her, played by Patrick Muldoon. And we have this sort of back and forth between him communicating with her and then training to be a squad leader, be a soldier. Dina Meyer ends up being in his squadron, and she's has feelings for him, and the sort of love triangle that they try to build in the movie comes off extremely cheesy. But in the same way, I think that Paul Verhoeven does a lot of his characters. Like everything is amped up. People's reactions are way over the top. I think a lot of what happens in this movie that is misunderstood is that he keeps things light and funny, because otherwise this movie would be so depressing. A lot of the scenes, it's like when you're watching it and you kind of, if you took all of the fun and goofiness out of it, it would be a really harsh, violent, depressing film. And I think that the balance that Verhoeven was trying to weigh with a movie like this really works well if you watch it in that sort of sense that this is satire. I can see how this movie was misunderstood when it came out, because it does feel like a propaganda film. It also is like ridiculously violent. I had forgotten how violent this movie was, but then again, so is RoboCop and Total Recall. We know Verhoeven loves violence, and there's a lot of it on the screen. I love the way that it's paced out. We follow these characters and they kind of come together every now and then. You kind of see where they're at in their positions and how they're each rising through the ranks of the military. And eventually, all of it is leading toward fighting these arachnids that seem to it almost seems like they're going to take over the earth. I've not always been the biggest fan of sci-fi movies, but this is the kind of sci-fi that I like, where you are getting the spaceships and the technology of where we could shift as a society, but you're also getting commentary on this different way of living, like how society could be if it starts splintering, and what things would be like under basically like a world run by the military. It's kind of scary, kind of frightening, because you can easily see something like that happening, because there's a lot of the movie itself does these little moments in the same way RoboCop does, where it's like news headlines and telling you where we are in society. And a lot of it feels very propaganda, like the scientists and democracy kind of, they ruin the world. And now the only way that we can all come together is to fight these arachnids. And it's very similar to how a lot of wars start, where you get everybody together to say, this is the enemy. We all have to come together and give up our freedom, everything, to fight and all be a part of this one big super force. There's a lot of satire in there, and I think the satire of fascism was really strong in this, but it was maybe so strong that people were like, wait a minute, is he saying that this is a good thing? And I guess, I don't know, the movie's so goofy, it's hard for me to believe that people thought that way when this movie came out. But then again, there's so few movies like this that come out. Verhoeven is such an unusual filmmaker in the way that he picks and chooses how to present these stories in such a over dramatic fashion. Can throw you off, but I think once you settle in, you really get you'll get the humor, you'll get the sense of irony and satire. This was a really fun rewatch. I also want to note that I would say 50% of this movie was CGI, and this is when this movie came out in 1997, and this seemed like kind of the dawn of doing heavy CGI. And it's surprisingly looks good, almost better, I think, than a lot of the cheaper CGI movies that you would have seen. I don't know why that is. I didn't go that far in the research for this pick of the week, but I was actually pretty shocked at how great this movie looks for something that was relying on newer technology, in the late 90s. There are several sequels to this movie that I have not watched yet. I did pick up Starship Troopers 2, but I didn't get a chance to check it out before we recorded this episode.
Yeah, I thought the special effects, when I finally got around to watching this movie, I always thought the special effects, it was the crossover from CGI to practical, because it looked really good. And this was something that I was maybe 15 or 16 when it came out, and I remember people just talking about just how it was like a military movie. I'm like, that's not my bag. So I don't think I saw this until maybe 10 years ago, and I'm old enough to get the satire, and it's so much more of an enjoyable watch than I would have ever thought when I was 15.
And I also forgot to mention Paul Verhoeven brings back a Michael Ironside that he used in Total Recall, and he plays what he does best, sort of hard as nails type character that's rough around the edges, but also is kind of funny at times.
Yeah, he's a great character actor.
Yeah. Well, those are our picks of the week: Starship Troopers and Bound. Here's your Murray moment.
dig me. Because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shucked?
The flowing robes, the grace, bald, striking.
That was fun.
For this Murray moment, my obvious path to Bill and Gina Gershon had already been exhausted in our Reservoir Dogs episode 96 by way of them both paying tribute to Bob Dylan during a massive show for Dylan's 77th birthday. So, where to go from here? It was time to think outside of the box. These Murray moments, sometimes my mind wanders and makes weird connections. Like, okay, what's the most memorable scene in Showgirls that people who've maybe only seen the film once vividly remember? I asked my friend Carson this and a few others, and they all said the pool scene. Okay, the pool scene. Nomi and Zach having violent sex in the pool. Well, although no Bill sex story immediately sprang to mind, what did was a story I haven't elaborated on, only mentioned in previous Murray moments. That being the first time our Billy met legendary Wildman Gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. I forget how many Murray moments we've done about these two, but it's definitely a handful. And finally, Showgirls brings us to how they first met. Somehow it feels appropriate, especially considering Thompson penned the also vivid novel Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas in '71. All right, still with me? Here we go. This meeting began at the Jerome Hotel in Aspen, Colorado. According to Bill, he had just completed his first year on Saturday Night Live, and Bill got a summer job. The show's creator and executive producer, Lorne Michaels, commissioned Bill to drive his Volkswagen Super Beetle from L.A. to New York. Well, Bill took the scenic route. Lorne came to realize that Bill was taking a sweet time because he'd hear from him in cities not between L.A. and New York. For instance, at one point much later, Bill was in Florida, clearly not on the way. And one of these detours he took was to Aspen, where Bill ended up poolside next to some, quote, goofy guy with whom he struck up a sort of instant camaraderie. We were having a great time, and there were all these goofy people around. Everyone was just having a lot of fun. And then there was this one particular guy. Bill was instantly drawn to him. We started talking about doing an escape act, and I said, I think I could do an escape act. Oh man, if Bill had any bravado or hot wind within him, he just met his match. So this guy, whom I did not know, said, well, I could tie you to this metal chair and toss you right in the pool. Bill, who especially then was up for any challenge, says, well, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's try it. Now, listeners out there, just remember this was a time when people did throw caution to the wind, and it was the mood of the time, Bill said, the late 70s. Be up for any adventure or be a total coos. So there I was, Bill said. They were using socks, shoelaces, and stuff, and I was tied to this metal chair. And I said, just before they threw me in, let's just, in case, throw me in where it's about 5 feet deep. So if I start struggling, I can stand up, get some air, go back down, because I really wanted to do this. In Bill goes, straight into the pool, tied to a chair, with logical planning of only being 5 feet deep, right? Well, maybe he'd heard about Houdini pulling this off, but obviously this was Bill's first time being tied to a chair in a perilous situation. So I went in, 5 feet deep, and I'm working the knots, and I thought, well, I'm thinking too hard. I'm just going to go up, grab a quick breath of air, and just to revive myself, then go back down, work a little harder. 5 feet down doesn't sound like a big deal for the 6-foot-tall Bill, but he failed to consider one important factor. So I stood up, he said, but when you're tied to a chair, you can only stand up so far. So there he is, about 5 inches below the pool surface, thinking to himself, nuts, what have I got myself into? He tried to signal via underwater head movements that he was in minor distress and needed some help. It took them about an 8 count before anyone realized I really wanted to be where they were, Bill said. But fortunately, Hunter was a really strong guy, and he reached in and with one hand pulled me out of the water. And even though he could have drowned had Hunter let him go any longer, Bill said when he was pulled out, he spit out some water, grateful for being saved, and says, hey, how about just move me into the shallow end, just in case. I didn't know who he, Hunter, was at the time, Bill said, but I did trust him with my life, so I think he was kind of touched by that. So kids, obviously don't try this at home. This was the beginning of a very well-known, probably unhealthy friendship between the two. By using water or a pool as a form of connection, a source of life, fertility, birth, death, regeneration, the mingling or cohesion of two people, whether it's Nomi and Zach in Showgirls or the two soon-to-be legendary intermingled friends of Hunter and Billy. There are just some particular moments in a pool that leave a lasting impression.
Anytime I think of pool and Bill Murray, I just immediately get a vision of his pool scene in Ed Wood.
Oh, man. That's a good one. I thought you were going to say Caddyshack.
Yeah, that's weird. He's got a few movies where
he does.
It's like it plays a big part of the scene. Well, thanks so much for that Murray moment.
Of course.
Did you have any final thoughts on Showgirls before we close this thing out?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that always sticks out for me is that anyone who was involved with this movie that had to do nudity or anything that could potentially make you uncomfortable when you're in front of a camera crew is that everyone said that they never felt creeped out with the crew or Verhoeven. Just working on the film, they felt totally comfortable and it was professional. And I think that says a lot, for a movie like this where you're in strip clubs and, there's just a hell of a lot of nudity. Oh, yeah. You know what? I don't think we mentioned the music. Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics was the one who created the soundtrack for this and even wrote the Goddess theme song, that epic. I mean, it's a wonderful song. So Dave Stewart was in charge of getting everything together for the soundtrack, which included at least 2 Prince songs, like 3 My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. Let's see, Susie and the Banshees was on there, Dwight Yoakam, of course, a David Bowie song, I'm Afraid of Americans. I love that one. A No Doubt song, and even Rena Riffle, who played Penny, she has a song in the scene where Nomi is first doing her striptease for Zach, and Gina Gershon's watching them. That's Rena Riffle.
Yeah, surprisingly, the soundtrack does not make the movie feel like 90s dated whatsoever.
No, it doesn't. I'm kind of a fan of it. I threw it on Spotify. The official soundtrack doesn't include every song that's in the movie. I think that happens a lot, but on Spotify you can people have compiled
they make their own.
Yeah, all the songs. Justin, what about you? Any final thoughts?
Not so much a final thought on Showgirls, but I was curious what Paul Verhoeven had been up to, because I hadn't really heard much about him or doing any American Hollywood type movies. So I checked out what he was up to, and he hasn't really put out too many movies recently, and most of the ones that he put out were ones that he did outside of Hollywood. I did see that he released a movie a few years ago that I'd never heard of called Benedetta, which looks pretty wild. It's like 17th century nun in Italy, has visions that are erotic.
I saw this preview.
Just the trailer I watched, it's like violence, religion, sex, very up his alley. So I might try to check that out because I saw that it was on Hulu. Because I'm always curious, like, he just has a style and sensibility that I think is just wildly different than most directors. And I don't know, he's made some really great movies. I'm happy that we were able to cover this film and kind of reevaluate it like everybody else has been in the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you wanted to do this. I'm finally glad. I feel like we gave Showgirls some justice, finally.
Well, that's all we have for this episode. Next month, it's going to be our 6th-year anniversary, which just always shocks me when we come up on another anniversary of this show we've been keeping up with. I still love it. It's still a lot of hard work putting out episodes, and we don't put out as many as we used to, but we still strive to, give you some good entertainment and some knowledge on films that we really find interesting, that we love. And we always try to do a big movie for our anniversary show, so we went with Jan de Bont's Speed, which came out 30 years ago, which is nuts.
Yeah, that feels crazy.
And I distinctly remember that movie being a big part of the summer when it came out. So I'm excited to jump into that movie. And I don't know if we've ever done like a big Keanu Reeves movie either, so that's kind of fun.
No.
Or a big Sandra Bullock movie.
Definitely not.
So this will be a fun for both of us.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. And I mean, 6 years, Justin. I mean, you guys out there, this podcast, from the editing, obviously the recording, and social media. This is all just us doing this. And Justin, thank you for all of your, diligence, hard work. It's difficult balancing a life and work life and doing this podcast, but we love it. And 6 years says a lot. And also, you probably know my voice better than anyone.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you for everything you bring to this, and all your writing and researching is it's astounding to me. So many times you put so much time and effort into it to make sure that we're not talking out of our asses.
Yeah, you'd have a lot more to edit if we didn't have an outline, something to go by.
Yeah.
There's been a lot that's been left on the cutting room floor for sure.
Well, thank you again for sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed our episode on Showgirls. Until next time, I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reber.